will impose new tariffs so that the products on our stores will once again be stamped with those beautiful words, made in the USA.
Bringing back manufacturing jobs, that's one of the president's stated goals in levying tariffs against our biggest trading partners. America was once the world's preeminent manufacturing power, but globalization and free trade have had the effect of undercutting American factories, and American automation has also thinned out our workforce. At the industry's peak in 1979, 19.6 million Americans made their living in the manufacturing sector. It's more like about 12.7 million now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Somewhere along the way, America abdicated its place atop the manufacturing world. So I want to go all the way back to the rapid industrialization of America and much of the world near the beginning of the 20th century. Henry Ford's car factories were pumping out the first automobile that was affordable to the middle class, the Ford Model T. Now, two inventions converged in those factories. Interchangeable parts allowed for standardized production, and the assembly line in which a worker does one thing, not the whole thing, rapidly sped up the manufacturing process. World War II pushed American factories, which were then retrofitted to make weapons, to their absolute limits. But we emerged from the war as the world's dominant political and economic power, largely through our ability to produce. By 1945, half of the world's goods, car parts, home appliances, clothes, you name it, half of the world's goods were made in America, according to the National World War II Museum. In that same year, the state of Pennsylvania itself produced more steel than Germany and Japan combined. Made in America became a symbol of pride and a guarantee of quality, but soon enough, a stew of globalization and trade and automation and a new consumer culture meant access to cheaper goods became a bigger priority than manufacturing those goods ourselves. The global financial crash in 1980 killed jobs. It pushed companies to lower their costs by moving production overseas, although several studies argue that automation may have ultimately led to far more job losses than outsourcing did, but both of them cost jobs. And global trade agreements like NAFTA were signed. It allowed companies to find production centers with lower wage laws, and in some cases, not NAFTA, but other agreements with looser labor rights. That reduced companies' overheads. Between 2000 and 2010, the U.S. lost a third of its manufacturing jobs. It was a sharp drop that led to many people in manufacturing hubs in this country, like Ohio and West Virginia and elsewhere, to struggle with mass unemployments, towns shutting down, mental health issues, and opioid addiction. Jobs were lost, factories were closed, service industries and technological innovation became the new source of America's economic power. We became an information economy. Over the last 70 years, the share of GDP made up by American manufacturing has dropped from nearly 27% to about 10%. And many of those lost jobs are in red states where support for President Trump is high. So it may, on its surface, seem sensible for Trump to want to bring manufacturing jobs to those very places hardest hit. But what exactly is the strategy? Factories need to exist in order for Americans to work in them and produce American-made products. So what are those products going to be? Soccer balls? Socks? Sunbeds? Where will the factories be? In Ohio? In Michigan? When will they be built? What does success look like here? They're good questions to which we have no answers. Not a single one. There is, in my humble opinion, no strategy here. Trump thinks tariffs will bring manufacturing jobs back, but you need a manufacturing policy in order for that to work. Tariffs should be the product of a sophisticated manufacturing infrastructure, not the other way around. It's kind of like buying a car before you learn to drive. You're not going to get very far. All right, joining me to discuss the president's tariffs and his goal to bring back American manufacturing are Jeffrey Sonnenfeld. He's a senior associate dean for leadership at the Yale School of Management. He's been writing about a lot of important things, but he's been writing about Trump trade deals since he took office. And Nicole Bevins Collinson, she served as an assistant chief negotiator for the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative and is currently the managing principal at Sandler, Travis and Rosenberg, PA. Welcome to both of you. Great to see you both. Thank you for being here. Nicole, let me just start with this because it's been a tough week for people who don't think about tariffs and trade and bond markets and things like this. But this does have a cart before the horse feel to it. The tariffs are not a beautiful word. They can be very effective and they can be terrible at the same time. But they need to be part of a strategy. They are a goal to achieve a strategy, and I'm not seeing the strategy.
1,000% ramp up in steel.
Yes.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Agreed. Okay, so I agreed. I would say that from my perspective, if you really want to try to bring back the manufacturing, is to take a careful look at what we're trying to bring back. Those programs or industries which we're providing some support, some would say subsidies, and then look at them to see which inputs may not be made in the United States, because you can't build everything from the ground up. You have to build it, and then the parts will start to come. So I think the first thing we need to do is examine which manufacturing industries we want to try to establish, then allow the tariffs to come in. Because if you just tariff on the finished product, you're going to ruin any investment in industrial manufacturing.
Jeff, what's your take on this? Because I share the president's view and the view of many Americans, Democratic and Republican, that we'd like to have some more manufacturing jobs here, particularly if they're high paying and they're commensurate to the type of education you can get in the United States. I'm not looking for jeans manufacturing from Lesotho to come back to America or sock manufacturing to come back to America. So how should we think about this?
No, your data on Lesotho was very compelling in the earlier hour, and it's an honor to join you and Nicole on this topic. And I agree your sentiment that we want for self-reliance, for national security, and for employment reasons to have a strong manufacturing base. It's somewhere around 4% of direct employment, 8% of indirect employment combined. And yet, you know, if we go back to when I was born, Ali, the economy, the GDP has grown 10,000% since I was born, and manufacturing is down by 50%, and agriculture is equally down by 50% in employment. But Is that a bad thing? We have structural shifts in the economy. So just because we have these shifts doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Most CEOs tell us, 85% of them, that are not only think that this is disastrous economic policy, but they are against these reckless, but they do want targeted tariffs. We have a 1,000% increase in steel and aluminum coming in from Canada the last 5 years. No, they didn't ramp up a 1,000% production. They're obviously shipping it in from Europe, some from Russia, other places that it's passing through Canada. And we some challenges in Mexico. Some targeted things make sense. But what we have is we have the frat boys all piled in there taking the car off the cliff, and nobody's saying that the driver is drunk. And I hate to say this, but your prior hour with Sean Fain shows that in this one instance, the UAW is in with the drunken frat boys taking the car off the cliff. It's the exact wrong thing to do as they're pushing for across-the-board reckless tariffs. It's quite dangerous. And for employment levels, it makes no mistake. It's a big mistake for inflation, for the impact on the GDP. It's disastrous what they're pushing for.
So, Nicole, one of the things we have to think about, because we lament the loss of our industrial sector, right? We talk about the Rust Belt. We talk about these states where jobs have been lost. But Jeff's right. We've had structural shifts. So while there were prosperous places that did certain things, returning to those same things won't necessarily result in the same prosperity again. If we start making socks again or we start making jeans again, what is the way to think about manufacturing? How much should we do? How much should it pay? What's better to just give our money to some other country to get their goods?
Again, you got to look at it strategically, right? Which products could we make in the U.S.? And then when you're going to make those, where are we in that process? Do we have the machinery already? Do we have the inputs? For example, we have a company that we're working with that makes bicycles. They are bringing bicycle manufacturing back to the United States. They're starting to build the frames here, they're building the brakes, but they can't build everything. And for example, they're never going to make the rubber tires. We don't grow rubber. Where is the rubber going to grow? So there's certain things that we just don't make. But if you look at it strategically and you want to encourage more investment in the U.S., you want to get those additional products in here, you might look at it and say, well, maybe for the next 2 years, we should keep some tariffs on some of the inputs, some of the parts, maybe the pedals, maybe the wires that you use for the brakes. But if the rest of it can be made here, then in 2 years, you can slowly build that manufacturing in. You can build backwards to get the components in. It's like I grew up in Kentucky. And whenever back in the 80s, Toyota moved in, there was an issue about where should they put the factory. They put it in Georgetown, Kentucky. I grew up in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And when it started, not all the inputs were there. But when I go home now, there's electric batteries being made there. There's magnets, there's brakes. So it builds around it. And that's what we have to do. But we have to look at it strategically.
So, Jeff, one of the things that Democrats and Republicans, there's overlap here, right? There are a lot of people, there are protectionists in both parties. There are free traders in both parties. So put the partisan politics aside here. There are things you should protect against. We don't have as well-developed an electric vehicle industry as China does. And if we don't develop it better, China is going to make all the electric vehicles because they're a lot cheaper. On the other hand, China makes a lot of electronics. And yesterday morning, 24 hours ago, we reported that some kind of deal has been made that all the electronics are coming in from China without the tariffs. You speak to CEOs all the time. What does success look like to them? And I only ask you this because it's not a show for CEOs. It's a show for average Americans. But those CEOs are going to determine that how those average Americans are employed and what they're paid. So what does success look like?
Well, for success, I mean, right now for the auto industry, it's just crazy, is that we're seeing that the surge in auto prices are going to lead to a loss of, at a minimum, 1 million jobs. And that this is also going to cut out the bonuses. If GM or others have to pay this surge in pricing, the $14,000 bonuses and profit sharing that they were making, it's going to disappear. It's going to be that, but these are industry-specific issues. Your bigger question, of course, is having 12,500 tariff categories across 200 trading partners, close to 130 flip-flops just in the last week, last 10 days. The CEOs is total confusion. They don't know how to invest. You know, you get these gaseous, huge pronouncements. Oh, Foxconn's going to relocate, as we heard in 2018 for $10 billion, ramping up in Wisconsin. There hasn't been a shovel put in the ground. Then nothing's happened. That what we see is CEOs are confused by the flip-flops, so they're not making massive investments. And to retool a factory, an existing factory, and to refacilitate it, it's conservatively 18 months. But a new factory, a new plant, automotive is 5 years, pharmaceuticals is the same. And right now we're looking at, despite maybe $100 billion of electronics that now won't have the tariffs coming in, we still have, that's only 23% of our imports from China. We still have all of our pharmaceutical, especially antibiotics, 90% of our antibiotics are coming in from China. And about a third of our active pharmaceutical ingredients for all other drugs are coming in from China before we get to garments, Ali. So it's total confusion. They don't, and those who told to resource in India and Vietnam, they're now being penalized for it.
You got the last word. We got to go now, but thanks, guys. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, professor of leadership practice at Yale School of Management. Nicole Bivens Collinson, managing partner at Sandler Travis and Rosenberg, PA.